If you think about difficult conversations, why are they difficult? Why are they difficult? Because there's no connection. Why are they difficult? Because you get scared of rejection. Why are they difficult? Because this is not where you wanted to be, right? This is difficult. So we often think about the other person is causing these difficulties. So we go back to the attachment theory. This is where everything started. John Bowlby, who was the father of attachment theory, studied mothers and children. And he understood this pattern that children go through when the mother is not responding or when the mother is responding. There's a great video that is called the Still Face Experiment. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's about 2.5 minutes. And basically, it's Adtronics from Harvard. And basically what they do is they ask the mother and the baby to interact. And the baby is smiling and the mother is smiling and they're interacting with each other. And then they ask the mother to go still and silent. No reaction on the face. And then you watch what happens to the baby. So what they saw is the first thing that the baby does is to reach. She's stretching her arms. Come on, talk to me. It's the 9-month-old baby. She's reaching. No response. The second thing the baby does is she's screeching. She's like making noise. Come back to me. Where are you? Where are you? Why are you not talking to me? So she's making all kinds of noise. Mother is not responding. The third thing the baby does is turn away, looking. What happened to my mother? She's gone. And the fourth thing the baby does is to cry. And we cry because when we get overwhelmed. The interesting part of it is when the mother comes back and says, here I am, it's okay, I'm here. The baby stops crying and smiling and back to her balance again. When they looked at the adults, they saw exactly the same pattern. When we get disconnected, we first to reach. We try to reach, but sometimes we don't know how to reach. So what do? We criticize. I sent you emails after emails. Why are you not responding to me? What's going on? So we already complaining, we're attacking, we're judging, we're criticizing in that moment. And the other person's, I'm going to shut down. I don't want to talk to you. You're becoming too aggressive at me. And then we overwhelm and we cry. I remember in working as an HR manager, not knowing, I cried a lot in my office. Or you walk around, you take off your shoes and walk around the building barefoot and you're trying to figure out what is going on. Why are we so distressed? Well, John Bowlby, he said that when we lose that connection, we go into what we call a panic, a separation distress. A separation distress happens to all of us. You can be a baby, or you can be 30 years old, or 60 years old, or 90 years old. We all have that same response to that distress, to the connection. And why do we have that same response in the workplace? Because we depend on each other. As soon as you have the dependency, your brain will tune into that connection and will say, I need to be connected to this person. And if you're not responding to me, if you're being aggressive, my nervous system is going to react. This is what happens in the negative cycle. The first thing, we get triggered. And many people are not even paying attention that they got triggered. And suddenly they either shut down or they start to talk too much or their voice elevated. But the start is always a trigger. And a trigger can be a facial expression, the words we say, body language, the reaction, the withdrawing. That is all triggers our nervous system, gives us a sense we're not safe. So we talked about the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex. That is when the amygdala gets activated, is with a trigger. The next thing is when we get triggered, we get disconnected, emotionally disconnected. There's a space. Suddenly, we're on two different planes, on a different side of the chasm. There's a space. And then we take one of these two positions. And one of these two positions is a pursuer or a withdrawer. We learned this from our childhood. We learned how to deal with our emotions by watching our caretaker or by watching our parents to respond to these stressors. So we have to understand, who am I? Am I a pursuer or am I a withdrawer? And as Polina mentioned in our panel, you could be one with one relationship and you could do the other in a different relationship. So when you start to identify and pay attention to how you respond to these disconnections, you start to notice yourself, oh my gosh, I'm pursuing. I'm actually complaining or criticizing, like one manager says, my direct report, she's whining all the time. She's whining and complaining. I don't want to meet with her anymore. So direct report is a pursuer, the manager is a withdrawer. So you have to know how to recognize this. And what are the behaviors? What do they do as a pursuer? Pursuers complain, whine, criticize. Not that it's bad, but they are expressing their distress, separation distress, by these behaviors. They're criticizing, the lecturing, judging, all of these behaviors of a pursuer. And when we see that behavior, we recognize right away that this person is disconnected. They are struggling for connection. They are calling for help, but they are doing it ineffectively. The withdrawers, they get busy, they avoid, they numb out, they distance. Again, normal. We all do that. Both these behaviors and these stances are okay to do it when it's once in a while. The problem becomes, it becomes habitual. And now it builds. And now one person doesn't even want to talk to the other person. As soon as they see them in the hallway, they run to the other side. This is a problem because people have to work together. They depend on each other. And if they can't talk to each other, they can't collaborate, they are in a negative cycle, it's going to create not only distress for them, but it will create distress for the whole team. Just like a manager, they think that they can come stoic in the meeting, but their emotions is written on their face. People can tune into that emotion because we are so sensitive to each other. So then when they behave, which means they get into this negative patterns, one pursues, the other withdraws, or one pursues, the other pursues, we get into these negative cycles, they both feel isolated and alone. And as I shared in our panel this morning, isolation is inherently traumatizing for people. We become very lonely when we isolate ourselves. We can't perform, our brain is not working, we can't create, and it becomes very discouraging for us. We cut off our social support system that we all need for us to continue to thrive and deal with stress. So people are withdrawers and pursuers get isolated and alone, and then they get stuck because they have low productivity, they don't have morale, they're not inspired, they're not motivated to do anything. And then behavior continues, and what happens? It's just a loop. So they get stuck in these terrible negative cycles. So you could have a pursue-withdraw cycle, you could have a pursue-pursue cycle, and you can have a withdraw-withdraw cycle. The easiest one to fix is pursue-pursue because they're both on the dance floor. They're just stepping on each other's toes all the time, and they're throwing each other jabs. That's the easiest one to fix. And the reason why it's easier, as soon as you give people tools and the roadmap, they're like, finally, somebody's hearing me. Finally, I can express myself much easier because now I have the language. Now I understand my experience. The harder one, of course, it is to fix the withdrawal because they're both off the dance floor. Well, I worked with a board. 2 board members have been on the board, and for 5 years, they didn't talk to each other. They're serving on the same board for 5 years. Yes, it took a while, but they became stronger when they were able to actually repair the disconnection. And when we had the conversation about what happened, it was 5 years ago when they got disconnected and they just didn't know how to talk about it. So pursue-withdraw is the most common cycle. It happens everywhere. All over in your companies, it happens. All in relationship, it happens. This is the most common cycle. And it often starts with pursue-withdraw cycle. But then Or it could be pursue, and then it transferred to pursue, withdraw, and then withdraw, because both people are exhausted. They just burned out, and they just don't want to talk anymore.
Think about, has anyone seen the movie Frozen? I love that movie. And there's one scene where like Anna's like, I want to be alone. Leave me alone in my ice castle. Elsa, and her sister's like, no one wants to be alone, Anna. And she's like, come and save the planet, So just think of it like that. We think we want to be alone, and sometimes we feel like, oh, I just want to be alone. It's like a dream to just be in my little, but actually we can't survive. So if you want to live a shorter life, have fun alone. But if you want to have a longer, healthier, thriving life, you have to learn how to connect in this way. That is how our cells in our mind and our body survive. I tell my kids the same thing. You have to learn how to communicate. It's not whether you want to or not. You don't have a choice. You have to, because it's inherently part of us. It's in your wiring in your brain. Okay, so there's 3 stages, and this is what you're gonna want to pay attention to so you understand how to work through a difficult conversation. Number 1 is create a safe environment. So the most important way to do that and most effective is to first say it's no one's fault, okay? Because immediately out of habit, and society teaches us to blame, to point fingers, to single people out. So very first thing is to stand neutral in the conflict, even if you are part of the conflict. And this is where learning about your own emotions and your own triggers will help you balance yourself so you can regulate your emotions and then help de-escalate someone else's emotions. But we want to make sure that we are clear that it's nobody's fault. It doesn't mean they're not responsible for a conflict or an issue that occurred. That will come. So we are not negating the fact that they took part in the conflict. It's just that we're removing the sense of being a bad guy. And when you remove that sense, that feeling where people feel like, oh, I'm being singled out, or oh, I'm the bad person, or I'm gonna get written up, or I'm gonna get fired, or whatever, that fear is like significantly lessened. So all of a sudden they feel safe enough to share, okay? So can everyone repeat after me? You are not the bad guy. It is not your fault.
It is not your fault.
Good. I see how excited you are to say that. I know that it's very different, and it could be very difficult coming out because we're not used to it. I have 5 kids, right? I'm like, it's your fault. I want to no, it's you. Stop. But it's like I have to be neutral. It's nobody's fault. Everything's okay. Everyone has their own perspective and experience, and it's valid. Think about, has anyone seen the movie Frozen? I love that movie. And there's one scene where like Anna's like, I want to be alone. Leave me alone in my ice castle. Elsa, and her sister's like, no one wants to be alone, Anna. And she's like, come and save the planet, So just think of it like that. We think we want to be alone. Sometimes we feel like, oh, I just want to be alone. It's like a dream to just be in my little, but actually we can't survive. So if you want to live a shorter life, have fun alone. But if you want to have a longer, healthier, thriving life, you have to learn how to connect in this way. That is how our cells in our mind and our body survive. I tell my kids the same thing. You have to learn how to communicate. It's not whether you want to or not. You don't have a choice. You have to, because it's inherently part of us. It's in your wiring in your brain. Okay, so there's 3 stages, and this is what you're gonna want to pay attention to so you understand how to work through a difficult conversation. Number 1 is create a safe environment. So the most important way to do that and most effective is to first say it's no one's fault, okay? Because immediately out of habit, and society teaches us to blame, to point fingers, to single people out. So very first thing is to stand neutral in the conflict, even if you are part of the conflict. And this is where learning about your own emotions and your own triggers will help you balance yourself so you can regulate your emotions and then help de-escalate someone else's emotions. But we want to make sure that we are clear that it's nobody's fault. It doesn't mean they're not responsible for a conflict or an issue that occurred. That will come. So we are not negating the fact that they took part in the conflict. It's just that we're removing the sense of being a bad guy. And when you remove that sense, that feeling where people feel like, oh, I'm being singled out, or oh, I'm the bad person, or I'm going to get written up, or I'm going to get fired, or whatever, that fear is like significantly lessened. So all of a sudden they feel safe enough to share, okay? So can everyone repeat after me? You are not the bad guy. It is not your fault.
It is not your fault.
Good. I see how excited you are to say that. I know that it's very different, and it could be very difficult coming out because we're not used to it. I mean, I have 5 kids, right? I'm like, it's your fault. I want to like, no, it's you. Stop it. But it's like I have to be neutral. It's nobody's fault. Everything's okay. Everyone has their own perspective and experience, and it's valid. Okay, so number 2 is clarify triggers, raw spots, and emotions. So what does that mean? I would say 99% of the time, we don't have the self-awareness to understand what is happening with us when we get triggered. So you may experience a conversation and not feel good about it, but don't realize you don't feel good about it, right? Until like you're later like, oh my gosh, like, or you start complaining. Like that's the number 1 sign, like, oh, I can't believe like Marcia told me, you know. And then when you start complaining, that's a sign. That is for you to notice when something doesn't feel good. And what I tell my team members is notice and pay attention to your physical body first. Because did you guys know that emotions is more contagious than a virus? Like talk about 6 feet distancing. We can't even 6 feet distance from someone who is not like happy because you see it. I could see someone's facial expression and feel their emotion in 100 millionth?
Milliseconds.
100 milliseconds. A virus, it takes 3 days to incubate in the body and then become sick. But emotions, 100 milliseconds. So you see me like happy, you're going to feel that happiness. If I start crying, you're going to feel that, okay? So it's really important to understand that if we cannot understand what's going on within ourselves, we feel it in our body first. That will give us a sign like, oh, something's going on. Let me think about what's happening. So we have the form, the step-by-step guide, and we're going to show you how to use it that goes over this. So that way it can organize your emotions for you. And then you can just follow the steps and you don't have to guess what's going on with you, okay? Or with the person that you're working with, or a team member, colleague, employee, or boss. So clarify trigger, raw spots, and emotions is just clarifying exactly what it was. So for example, is it Marcia? Okay. Well, Marcia came to my table today and she just like rolled her eyes and walked past. Okay. She didn't really, but I'm just using this as an example. And so I was like, whoa, what did I do? Was it what I was wearing? Did I smell bad? Did my coffee breath? No, all of a sudden I go into like that analyzing, like what did I do wrong, right? So identifying the trigger is being very specific. When Marcia rolled her eyes, like that made me feel like something is not wrong with her, but maybe something's wrong with me. So that experience right there is identifying the trigger. So being clear, it could be a facial expression, tone of voice, it could be a decision, an action. Doesn't mean my daughter did something wrong or Marcia did something wrong, because their experience is their own experience. We get to hold that space for them. But it still affected me, and I get to put a voice to that. Because when you put a voice to that, then all of a sudden my amygdala is calm, I feel relaxed. Then you have so much more empathy for the person, okay? And you have empathy for yourself. That helps balance your emotions. And then raw spots is identifying what exactly. Well, when the eyes rolled, I felt like I was not being valued. And then emotions, I felt hurt or I felt confused. All those are identifying clearly what is going on with us, okay? Step 3 is automatic thoughts and protective behavior. So typically what you learned in your childhood, most people, if you get hurt, you either stop your crying, go to your room, time out, shut the feelings down. So when I learned shut the emotions down because they're not important, I felt dismissed, not seen, and also not accepted for who I am, right? Like never good enough. So that's a very common experience people have in their childhood. And then they bring it to work, right? And we see it in every single conflict. We see that. We see their patterns, the cycles that they've experienced in their childhood. So to protect myself, I did what typically withdrawers do is shut down. I have to get away. I don't need you anyways. She had to slowly use the withdrawing tools to create a safe enough space for me to understand that I was safe to share my experience. And it was a very different conversation after that. The automatic thoughts and protective behaviors are that I withdrew, I shut down my protective behavior. So that's not effective. So what does it create in the workplace? It creates distance. It creates high turnover. It creates less sales because people are not as productive. So what we want to do is to be able to, just like Dr. Lola said, shorten that gap of time where people are disconnected, reconnect them so that you do have this thriving environment. And then number 4 is raise awareness of the negative cycle as the enemy. So that's same going back to number 1, which is it's nobody's fault. So instead of using the word fight or dilemma or problem person in the company, we say negative cycle. So I use that same language because it's also a different frequency. Words have frequencies, emotions have frequencies, and we want to change and shift that frequency. So negative cycle is typically what we say. We're in a negative cycle. And sometimes you could just say that. Hey, I see we're in a negative cycle. Let's just, work through it or breathe through it and give some space and we can come back and have a conversation, a bonding conversation.
So I think when people come to you and they learn the process and they say, we got into a negative cycle, we need some help, they have graduated stage 1 because they recognize nobody's fault, they got stuck, and we need help to guide them back to connection. So this is extremely important.
So stage 2 is restructure. So after you do those first 4 steps, you want to define safety needs to create a positive cycle. So this is something that is very unique to our process, is you can share what's going on with you and someone can then return and validate, make sure that you feel heard and understood. But what we really need is that emotional support. So creating the positive cycle looks like having a conversation similar to what you just had with the person that you're in conflict with. So it is easier with someone that you're not in conflict with. But when you are in conflict with the person, you want to have a conversation with that person to be able to also ask for what you need on an emotional level. Okay, so what that looks like is if you did struggle with something, let's say Marcia rolled her eyes and I got triggered, and then I felt safe enough and we happened to work together and I felt safe enough to share with her, hey, you walked by my desk and rolled your eyes and I was really triggered by that and I just want to share how it made me feel and you're really important to me and I would love to know what's going on with you. If there's something that I can help support you, then it's also being able to respond to her needs. That's being accessible, responsive, and engaged, and also ask for what I need. Hey, I really want to know that I'm important to you as well, or that you do care about me, or that you do feel like you understand that it's really difficult for me if there's something going on that there's no communication or I don't feel like there's conversation about that. And it's just the eye roll. So that's a really important aspect. That's the time where people can actually bond after a conflict. So you can share what's going on. You can also share the image of how it looks like in a picture of how you feel. But if you're not actually getting the repair, the emotional responsiveness from the other person, then you're not actually able to complete the cycle. Okay, so if that happens, Sometimes in relationships we say like, oh my God, you're bringing that up again? Oh, you want to talk about it again? Like, oh my God, that happened like 6 years ago. The reason why that happens is because there's no repair, right? You can talk about it on a content level. Maybe you can even get to the point where you can say like, oh, this is what the image looked like. But then there's no like, I need that reassurance, or I need that validation, or I need to know like, hey, my feelings are valid. You can agree or disagree, but I still get to be valid in my experience. So that's a really important part. And then facilitated bonding moment to repair this connection is that conversation and then creating that bonding moment. So you can actually use this process for your own relationships at work if you're in a conflict, or you can help facilitate your employees, your colleagues. You can help facilitate, because sometimes what happens is when you are in the conflict, right, emotions are so powerful and they go so fast, like Dr. Lola said, we can get overwhelmed. So, we can't always understand what's happening with us, right, when we are in the conflict ourselves. But then when we get an opportunity to share in this way with a colleague that we're not in conflict in, it helps de-escalate what's happening with us. And then we can turn to the person that we are in a conflict with and we can share what's going on. So then it's not in a form that's not effective, right? It's a form that's effective. So, and then the last one is integrate, which is just like practicing these same conversations every single time you're in a conflict. One thing I do with my team is I have weekly meetings. And in the weekly meetings, it's not about anything to do with content. It's just about any conflicts. Like, let's go around the room and everyone share what's happened with them that could be difficult, that didn't feel good, that they want to share. And then it creates a space where people get like that relief and what they need emotionally, so they feel validated, understood, and heard. And then they're like, oh, yay, now I can thrive in the workplace, as opposed to constantly thinking about that. I do want to add that holding on to something that's painful to you is very heavy. It is like carrying a huge bag of bricks. Okay, so imagine having a team with a huge bag of bricks carrying around the workplace, and you're like, well, what did you think about this plan? And they're trying to now cognitively think about new ideas, be creative, be, engaged, and they're holding this bag of bricks. So every time you see one of your employees or your team members and they're struggling, just remember that image, that in order for them to put that bag of bricks down, they have to be able to communicate what they're feeling. And if they don't communicate that, they will just continue to add bricks until they're no longer able to do anything in the workplace. And that's typically why we see people get fired or written up, because they've gotten to that point. Okay? Even if they're newer employees, we had a situation where we had a team and the employee just came on board very, very quickly, just was disconnected, disengaged. That comes from past work experiences too, that they're carrying. I think it's called baggage, right? That comes with their past work experience. Unfortunately, sometimes we have those situations where if we can hold that space for them, it will quickly drop their bricks, and then we will have an easier time connecting with them. So. And then this last slide is the form. So if you came by our table, you could see we have a whole journal of these forms. So what we do in our training is we teach how to use this form. So just like the steps I explained, number one is I got triggered, the raw spots. This is what I like about this form. Even though it may seem a little scripted at the beginning, it's because you're learning a new language, right? So we have to get comfortable with something that is so different. So we just go through each of the steps. So it organizes what's going on with you and your feelings. And then you can go to the person and say, oh, Marcia, I got triggered when I felt this. My raw spots were this. This is what it looked like. This is what I did. I blamed you. I shamed. I withdrew. I said, I don't need you anyways. And then this is what I actually need. So this makes it a conversation that is simple and effective, and also a very, very organized way.
And I want to add that when I watch team members do and facilitate this type of conversation, or even in a training session, what I see, just like with the baby, the baby is upset, is crying, but when they get to the box number 6 and they ask for what they need and then they get what they need, people say, I feel connected, I feel safer, I feel grateful, I feel not alone. Just like this. It's like, wow, that was fast. because they have been so confused and not heard. And in that moment, you create that bonding conversation. And bonding conversations is like electrifying. It's like New York skyline. You know, you have that energy, emotions, because emotions are so powerful. They create that connection, and we suddenly become happy. And people say, when I feel this way, when I feel hopeful and stronger and free, and suddenly I feel connected, I can do anything. Now we can resolve problems, we can attend to each other, we can engage with each other. And then it's going to create all of these experiences where my brain says, you are here for me. Are you there for me? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. And so now your brain becomes more secure in your relationship. So you no longer get triggered as quickly, as often as you were triggered before when there was no security in the relationship. And conversations become no longer difficult because you can talk about anything openly. You can talk about the mistakes, you can talk about the change in strategy, you can talk about because it's no longer defensiveness and accusation and criticism and judgment. We are like on the same page. We can understand each other.
So we have an assessment. I know if you were there in the morning, we talked about this tool. So the biggest issue that we see too is that people just are not aware. So disengagement, we say, is disconnection. So if you already have a disengaged team member, then that's a sign that they are disconnected. So if you're not sure of how you feel, whether you feel safe or not in your workplace environment, or if your team feels safe, you can take the assessment, and the assessment will give you your capabilities and give you insight to the emotional capabilities that you need to work on and improve on, and what you're doing really great and things that you can work on. And then also how your team members are working together. And then if you want, we're also able to hop on a Zoom call and we can go over the report with you. Or if you have like a team that you want to take the assessment, we'll give the access to your team, and then we can review the report so you can see whether your team is emotionally safe or not.